like cigarettes and so forth, increases dopamine 2.5 times above baseline. So there's a peak that goes up above baseline 2.5 times higher. It is very short-lived. Anyone who's ever been a chain smoker or observed a chain smoker understands that the increase in dopamine from nicotine is very short-lived.
Yeah.
Cocaine will increase the level of dopamine in the bloodstream 2.5 times above baseline. And amphetamine, another drug that increases dopamine, will increase the amount of dopamine in the bloodstream 10 times above baseline. A tremendous increase in exercise. Now, exercise will have a different impact on the levels of dopamine depending on how much somebody subjectively enjoys that exercise. So if you're somebody who loves running, chances are it's going to increase your levels of dopamine 2 times above your baseline, not unlike sex. People who dislike exercise will achieve less dopamine increase or no increase in dopamine from exercise. And if you like other forms of exercise like yoga or weightlifting or swimming or what have you, again, it's going to vary by your subjective experience of whether or not you enjoy that activity. This is important, and it brings us back to something that we talked about earlier. Remember that mesocorticolimbic pathway? Well, the cortical part is important. The cortical part actually has a very specific part, which is your prefrontal cortex, the area of your forebrain that's involved in thinking and planning and involved in assigning a rational explanation to something and involved in assigning a subjective experience to something. Right? So for instance, the pen that I'm holding right now is one of these Pilot V5s. I love these Pilot V5s. They don't sponsor the podcast. I just happen to like them. I like the way that they write, how they feel. If I spent enough time thinking about it or talking about it, I could probably get a dopamine increase just talking about this Pilot V5. And that's not because I have the propensity to release dopamine easily. It's that as we start to engage with something more and more, and what we say about it and what we encourage ourselves to think about it has a profound impact on its rewarding or non-rewarding properties. Now, it's not simply the case that you can lie to yourself and you can tell yourself, I love something, and when you don't really love it, and it will increase dopamine. But what's been found over and over again is that if people journal about something or they practice some form of appreciation for something or they think of some aspect of something that they enjoy, the amount of dopamine that that behavior will evoke tends to go up. So for people that hate exercise, you can think about some aspect of exercise that you really enjoy. However, I will caution you against saying to yourself, I hate exercise, or I hate studying, or I hate this person, but I love the reward I give myself afterward. Later, we're going to talk about how rewards given afterward actually make the situation worse. They won't make you like exercise more or studying more. They actually will undermine the dopamine release that would otherwise occur for that activity. So certain things, chemicals, have a universal effect. They make everybody's dopamine go up. So some people like chocolate, some people don't, of course, but in general, it causes this increase in dopamine. But sex, nicotine, cocaine, amphetamine, those things cause increases in dopamine in everybody that takes them. Things like exercise, studying, hard work, working through a challenge in a relationship, or working through something hard of any kind, that is going to be subjective as to how much dopamine will be released. And we will return to that subjective component in a little bit. But now you have a sense of how much dopamine can be evoked by different activities and by different substances. One that you might be wondering about is caffeine. I'm certainly drinking my caffeine today, and I do enjoy caffeine in limited quantities. I drink yerba mate and I drink coffee, and I love it. Does it increase dopamine? Well, a little bit. Caffeine will increase dopamine to some extent, but it is pretty modest compared to the other things that I described: chocolate, sex, nicotine, cocaine, amphetamine, and so on. However, there's a really interesting paper published in 2015. This is Volkow et al. You can look it up. It's very easy to find. That showed that regular ingestion of caffeine, whether or not it's from coffee or otherwise, increases upregulation of certain dopamine receptors. So Caffeine actually makes you able to experience more of dopamine's effects. Because as I mentioned before, dopamine is vomited out into the synapse or it's released volumetrically, but then it has to bind. And you start scrolling and you're on, like, let's say Instagram or something, and you come across a young person, a very young, very talented, very successful, let's say, musician, and you're like, oh, cool, a person who's done more in their 18 years than I'll ever do in my lifetime. Let's look at all their pictures and read all the comments and just flood my brain with this. You know the feeling where you're just like, damn, I'm going to have a great day after looking at all this social media. So you click on one of the pictures and you notice that there are like all these top comments from all these blue tick accounts. So you click through to their profile because, you know, screw mental health, only to learn that they're more successful, more talented, and younger than you. And according to you, in that moment, they also have zero signs of struggle.
Fuck. Tonight, we meet a 16-year-old who's got more in common with venture capitalists than guidance counselors in algebra.
YouTube celebrity at just 11 years old. Most influential teenagers put out by Time magazine.
Already locked down enough seed money that he dropped out of high
She
school.
was just 19 when recording 19.
At the age of 15, she developed a boutique skincare business.
Mendez only turned 21 in 2019.
Self-made millionaire.
Born in 2004.
Jack Bloomfield is 17 years old.
After 2 depressing hours of scrolling, you put your phone down and you look around your apartment at your very regular life. Instead of seeing millions of fans, you see a broken fan, actually. Yeah, shit, I'm gonna get that fixed. You see the bill that you haven't paid, and the fridge that's still leaking, and the shelves I gotta fix, the car reg I gotta pay, and the deadlines that just keep looming over me. And you might feel something energizing, you know, you might feel like, oh, one day this will all be better. I'll get my mansion, I'll get mine. But it's more likely that you'll just feel like you're behind in life. After a few hours on the devil apps, I tend to feel like everyone everywhere is getting ahead, just killing it and leaving me behind. And if I could just work perfectly for the next 3 years with zero panic attacks, I could get there too, right? It is exhausting. But there's some good news. It's a trick. Crazy. You've probably heard of Dunbar's number, the theory that we can only maintain 150 meaningful relationships at any one time. The actual number itself is in contention, and obviously social media throws a spanner in the works. But one thing that most researchers can agree on is that the number is finite. Now, this is quite important. So couple this with the fact that we are biologically hardwired to compare ourselves to other people. If you think back in ancient times and you're watching somebody's crops grow better than yours, you'll be like, damn, I should know what they're doing. That way I will be more fed. Thanks, neighbor. So combine these two facts and we can produce a third concept: comparison slots. We have a finite amount of slots in our brain that we can put people in against who we can compare ourselves to. Whoever's filling these slots will change as we focus on different things. If we put all our attention on the 1% as we scroll through all these successful young people, yeah, of course we are going to feel behind in life because our frame of reference is a bunch of ultra-rich, successful, talented teenagers. And, you know, I'm 30 and I've only just started taking my life seriously, so... Whoops. So looking at this concept, it's easy to think that the solution would be, oh, well, I'll just stare at a bunch of people who suck and fill my comparison slots with people who are doing worse than me, so I'll constantly feel better, right? I'll just look at Johnny, who sold his foot for Kid Rock tickets. Unfortunately, though, this is more or less the same habit, and it's only going to lead us to inevitable ugly feelings again. A slightly more stable solution would be to fill those comparison slots with people who inspire you and people who did blow up later in life. You know, people like Colonel Sanders who made KFC in his 60s. You've seen those memes, you know, the ones that are like, J.K. Rowling didn't write her first Harry Potter book until she was 412. So that means you don't have to try at all. Yeah. I think this is an okay solution, but I think underneath it all, it still reinforces two ideas. One, that you have to blow up, and two, that it is in some way dependent on your age. When we put pressure on these two variables, success and age, I think that's exactly when we start to feel behind in life. Because I think that's actually what the definition of feeling behind in life is, not having enough success by a certain age. So I think it's therefore important to break these two concepts down. And that's what we're going to do with the next part of the video, starting with success. What is it, man? My sister is a counselor, so when she asks me how I'm going, I usually give her a pretty honest answer. And the other day she did ask me how I'm going, and I said, I feel good, but I feel like people won't love me unless I'm successful. I don't know. Gotta be honest. And she said, how about you rephrase that as an I statement? And I'm all like, what do you mean? Because I'm the dumber one of the two of us. And she goes, how about you say, I won't love me if I'm not successful? And that's when it starts to kind of hurt and unpack a few things. Her theory is that for a lot of people who do feel behind in life, or for a lot of people who are chasing success in a traditional sense, we have this sense that we have to achieve things in order to be worthy of other people's love. But really, we also have to achieve things in order to be worthy of our own love. And because we lack that self-love, we attribute that lack to the first thing that we can see and control, which is success. Therefore, get really successful so you can love yourself. Cool. And if you're not, you will feel that shitty feeling. That makes sense as a theory. I subscribe to it, but it does beg the question, what's the solution? Do I just love myself and let my drive for success die? This feels really good in theory and just really awful in practice. Personally, I think the solution comes in redefining success. And redefining it in a way that ultimately leads to self-love. This way you can have your cake and eat it too, which is a really weird expression. For me, success is having incredible relationships with people and making meaningful work. With that definition in place, it's time to discuss the second variable, timings. Something that I've only realized recently is that young success looks really cool on the surface, and any deeper than that, it looks like pure agony. I'm going to tell you two stories about two people whom I've been a fan of at various points in my life. The first one I was only a fan for a very fleeting moment, and the second one I assume I'll be a fan of for a very, very long time. The first person is Lil Xan. I'm embarrassed that I was a fan, actually. Something about his attitude just appealed to me. I don't know what it was, but if you don't know, he was a rapper called Diego Llanos who blew up in 2018 with an album called Total Xanarchy. He would have been 21 years old, and he was in that wave of face-tattooed, leaned-up rappers that was just so popular for 6 months. So this kid gets flown around the world, collaborates with all sorts of people, and people are even getting like face-tattooed replicas of Lil Xan. He gets to this height where it's just so hard to ignore him, and he is basically a meme and ultra famous. But Lil Xan was just Lil. He was a kid, and sadly he didn't navigate fame and success too well. In one interview, he was asked about what he thought about Tupac, and he said, boring music. People were ready to hate him. He went from superstar to punchline, and between the hate, the drugs, and the pressure, his mental health declined. I want to show y'all what mental illness really fucking looks like. I just did this to my car. Scratched it, keyed it up, I just bought it. I just bought this fucking car. Fucking door. When I'm doing that, because of mental fucking illness. I'm a fucking slave. I'm a slave to my management. I'm a slave to everybody. I don't get control of my bank account. I don't get control of shit. I can't even drive that fucking car. It's honestly heartbreaking to see all that potential and promise turn into something so painful. Now he's 24, stuck with the same face tattoos and focusing more on narcotics than music. So can we call Lil Xan successful? I mean, what good is money and fame if you feel like shit? And what about his future? What can we say for what's going to happen next to Lil Xan? Does he have to live his life feeling like he peaked? I hope not, but probably. But the biggest question above all of this is, was his work, at the very least, meaningful? You tell me. Now let's compare that story of blowing up at 21 to the story of Brene Brown, who did a TED Talk in her 40s and blew up after that. Now she's in her 50s and at the peak of her career, and she's having a lot of longevity with it. And the reason that she is so relatable is because she is literally relatable. She spent most of her life living like all of us, living all normal-like, man. She's going to have a long career full of meaningful work, and I think that her work actually resonates more with people because she blew up late. In short, the timings of when you make something is irrelevant. Sure, you can catch a trend train, but you'll just go up and come down. What really matters is whether or not the work is meaningful. So instead of focusing on an arbitrary deadline, like I need to make blank by here, otherwise blank, it makes a lot more sense to just focus on making something incredible. I always like to leave these things with a little bit of homework, something that you can journal on. The first question you can journal on is, how do you define success? The second question is, how could deferred success serve me in the long run? And the third question is, how is feeling behind in life the best thing that has ever happened to me? Ultimately, social media is not on your side, and while we love success stories, we connect so much more through failures. Being relatable is the thing that creates meaningful work. Resonating with other people, that's the whole goal here. And all these shitty things that you're wrestling with make you so much more valuable as a human, as somebody who can give empathy, and as an artist or as somebody who creates something. It's all on your side. I know it might not seem like it in certain moments, particularly when we're scrolling in the phone and we see all that stuff that yells at us, but it's the struggle that unites us, the struggle that creates the most meaningful work, and the struggle that creates the most meaningful relationships. And I think all that meaning and overcoming all those struggles are the things that create self-love. So, full circle. Anyway, I'm going to get off my soapbox now, and I'm going to leave you with this final tweet from Wesley Snipes.
Hang on, is your name Wesley Snipes? That is insane.
It's insane
The actor Wesley Snipes has that name. If you saw a picture of him and a picture of me, and you were asked who should be named Wesley Snipes, you'd pick the pale Englishman every time, Liz.
Not that Wesley Snipes. This Wesley Snipes. Don't let the internet rush you. No one is posting their failures. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you feel a little bit better, and I hope you can start to reframe your brain. Good luck with the journaling. Subscribe if you're new. I make videos like this every week. If this is the first one you've seen, let me know what you liked in the comments, and let me know what other topics you want to see me cover. Alrighty, have a gorgeous day. Catch ya.
Tired is my favorite song. It's hard to choose a favorite, but it's always landed as one of the truest for me. Toronto musician Emma Cook released her 5th album on Thursday titled Fight Left in Me, a project she's been working on for the last 3 years and includes the song Tired. I wrote that about, I think in my years of being a mom and a woman and seeing different women in my sort of walk of life, and there's certain women that the work they're doing is just not being recognized. And this particular song is about someone close to me who it just feels like she does so much and it's just not recognized in her relationship. The mother of 2 made a major life change in the last year. She moved her family out of Toronto. Well, like most artists, I've had this dream of I can create a masterpiece if I'm in a cabin in the woods. Like I've talked to so many people, and it's the same thing. If I could just go to a cabin in the woods, which is why this whole moving out of the city seed was born many years ago. Her and her husband created Foray Cabins, an off-the-grid net zero eco resort based in Muskoka. We're in the process of rezoning this property to allow us to have 11 tiny cabins, and so that project is, it's still underway, rezoning, it's a whole thing. Well, Emma hopes her music helps people connect and gets them throughout life's winding road. Her oasis in Northern Ontario is also helping people reconnect with themselves. One guest in particular was a recent woman. She was a mom of 2 little kids, had not been away from them yet since she'd given birth. They were 6 and 4, and she came for a weekend away on her own from the city. And she wrote this amazing guest book entry, and it was like, yes, like this is why I did this. For City News, I'm Lindsay Dunn.
For 26 years, 22 Minutes has been Canada's go-to source for fake news, but it's time to finally admit that when it comes to fake news, we can no longer compete. These days, fake news is used to describe the real media, mainly thanks to one man. I'm not going to give you a question. You are fake news. President Trump even claims to have invented the term fake news.
I think one of the greatest of all terms I've come up with is fake. I guess other people have used it perhaps over the years, but I've never noticed it.
Now that is fake news because the term fake news was being used as far back as 1890. As you can see here in this quote from the Cincinnati Commercial Tribune, Secretary Brunel declares fake news about his people is being telegraphed over the country. Perhaps Mr. Trump didn't notice it because it was used in a newspaper. So what do you do after you label the real news as fake news? You create your own news channel to say whatever you want. Trump News is owned by Donald Trump.
Thank you for joining us as we provide you the news of the week from Trump Tower here in New York. Since the president took office, President Trump has created more than 1 million jobs. I'm Kayleigh McEnany, and that is the real news.
No, Kayleigh, that's not the real news. That is the real fake news. That's propaganda, much like you see on state-owned channels in places like North Korea. But that could never happen in Canada, right?
Putting consumers first, the premier formally launched the Buck a Beer Challenge.
We believe in giving relief to the taxpayers, putting money back in the taxpayers' pocket.
For Ontario News Now, I'm Lindsay Van Stone.
Rejoice, workers! Glorious leader Doug Ford has gifted you with Buck a Beer. He of the most natural golden hair has given us an affordable way to numb our pain. It is futile to resist. Reporting live from the basement of Doug's mom's house, Lindsay Van Stone, Ontario News Now. Yes, Canada's own Trumpkin, Ontario Premier Doug Ford, has started his fake news as real news channel too. But that's not all. Not only is Ford making up his own fake news, he's actively trying to suppress the real media.
Government staffers once again loudly clapped to end the Doug Ford news conference, drowning out journalist questions.
So Doug is saving you money on beer, but he wasted money forcing taxpayer-paid government employees to drown out the press. So I guess it evens out as long as you drink a lot of beer, which you will probably have to do if you want to make it through an episode of Doug Ford's news show. So how can comedians like me bring you fake news when politicians are claiming that the real news is the fake news and making up their own new news? I give up. I think the Canadian Screen Award and Emmy for Best Fake News Show should go to Doug Ford and to Donald Trump this year. They deserve it. After all, they're the ones really making a mockery of the news. When it comes to fake news, we've been trumped.
It's almost like a golden rule or a bloody rule. Every revolution ends up eating its own. Every messianic revolution, think the Russian Revolution, the French Revolution, Robespierre to the guillotine, and the same is now happening with the identity politics revolution. Take what's just happened to Canada's Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau. Now, this man, he's been a hero of the left, as woke and as sanctimonious as you could wish. A real finger wagger on, for instance, gender issues.
Maternal love is the love that's going to change the future of mankind. So we'd like you to...
We like to say people kind, not necessarily mankind.
Yeah.
It's more inclusive.
There we go, exactly.
What a brat. And naturally, Trudeau has been right into identity politics, a real race warrior, accusing people left and right, well, mainly right, of being racists and white supremacists.
A small minority, angry, frustrated group of racists don't get to define who we are as a country.
Oh dear, that is embarrassing, because it now turns out that a small group of racists do indeed get to define who Canadians are, because that small group of racists actually includes the Prime Minister himself, or so he admits. You see, Trudeau, when he was a teacher, dressed up in blackface or brownface, whatever you want to call it, for a party with an Arabian Nights theme. And while that wasn't racist at the time, it is very, very racist now, according to the new rules of identity politics.
In 1967, Canadians had World's Fair fever as Montreal hosted Expo 67. The national and theme pavilions have long disappeared, leaving a vast parkland named for a long-serving mayor of Montreal and the father of Expo, Jean Drapeau.
We're here today at the Parc Jean Drapeau in Montreal, an island situated at the middle of the St. Lawrence River.
There's so much to see and do in this area. We settled for a ride along the Gilles Villeneuve track and visit the Montreal Casino and nearby Biosphere.
You can reach Parc Jean Drapeau by metro, car, bicycle, or foot.
We are heading over Jacques Cartier Bridge, which brings us to Ile Saint-Hélène.
The interesting thing about the island is it's made from the earth dug out for underground train system.
It was a formidable task building islands in the midst of the St. Lawrence.
Built islands. Come on, we're talking about building something the size of 64 city blocks.
12 months and 25 million tons of fill later, St. Helens Island was reshaped and Ile Notre Dame was created.
Come on. We don't want to keep Mayor Drapeau waiting, do we?
On a man-made site in the middle of the St. Lawrence River, an estimated 50 million will have visited the largest World Fair ever.
Time has erased much of what was once Expo 67, though for many, half a century hasn't faded memories of the fair that transformed a city and perhaps a country too.
Montreal's Expo 67. It would prove to be the most successful World's Fair of the 20th century.
Who's on the bubble?
On the bubble. Teams must make their way to Ile Saint-Hélène and locate the Environment Museum at the Montreal Biosphere, built for Expo 67. This architectural marvel is now a center for environmental research and education.
Hey, that was there in 1967?
That's pretty crazy they built something that cool back then.
The American Pavilion, which still stands today, was especially notable because it caught the eye of one famous mouse lover.
Walt Disney, when he came to Montreal and he saw the Buckminster Fuller sphere, he loved it. He really wanted one for his future park that he would call Epcot, part of Disney World.
To me, it's really fascinating to come up close to something that I've seen pictures of years and years and years.
Whoa, created for environmental awareness. Amazing.
Outside of the bubble was plastic. Periodically, they had to fix the structure with welding. So the guys up there welding with a fire extinguisher, because sometimes they would get too close to the bubble and the bubble would catch on fire. He put it out. He's got his last couple of things to solder. It catches fire and no more fire extinguisher. So the whole thing catches on fire.
The interesting thing about it is that it was featured in the original TV show Battlestar Galactica.
We actually just spotted a swimming pool. Ooh, that looks really nice right about now.
Using filtered water from the St. Lawrence, Notre Dame Lake and Beach offers all water sports.
Oh, there's foxes! They're legit foxes! What the heck? They're so big. Also, why?
Shut. Fuck. Oh, God, you fucking people want everything to your fucking dumb brain.
City News has learned that more than a dozen unvaccinated TDSB teachers have been sent home without pay, and that number could climb into the hundreds over the next couple weeks.
98 permanent staff and about 609 occasional staff have been put on non-disciplinary administrative leave without pay.
This is step one of the Toronto School Board's implementation of its vaccine mandate for all staff and teachers. The 707 full and part-time staff sent home this week declined to reveal their vaccine status.
At last check, I think there were 16 teachers among those 98. So it is a limited amount, but it really does touch on a number of different departments across the TDSB.
In late August, TDSB trustees voted unanimously to mandate vaccines for all staff and teachers across the board. Staff who don't have their first or second dose by November 21st will be sent home without pay. With a little more than 2 weeks to go, the board tells City News about 2.5% of all staff, which equals 1,045 employees, have confirmed they're unvaccinated. Potentially hundreds of those are teachers. You could be sending them home on November 21st. Could that be a big impact for the board and for teaching staff?
You know, I think we remain hopeful that many will get vaccinated. We do have a robust occasional teacher roster to be able to cover off most of these. We anticipate that it shouldn't be a problem.
Of those unvaccinated, 410 TDSB employees are seeking medical exemption, and 499 have filed paperwork for a creed-based or religious exemption.
But right now we have 5 approved medical exemptions. So I don't anticipate that being a large number in the end. At this point, we have 0 approved creed-based exemption requests. The Human Rights Code asks us to ensure that we are considering these, and we are indeed.
One Toronto area emergency room doctor who's been closely following COVID in our schools believes it's imperative that the TDSB gets this right.
It's really vital because schools represent a huge vulnerable population, all children below 12.
Medical experts on the front lines are quick to point out that this move isn't just meant to protect children.
The bulk of people we're seeing now who get serious COVID are unvaccinated. Almost all of them are unvaccinated. This protects them as much as it protects the kids around them.
I hope your Christmas bonus is fucking big.
The British Health Secretary calling it a game changer. The UK on Thursday issuing the first ever approval for an antiviral pill to treat COVID-19.
We have become the first country in the world to approve an antiviral for COVID-19, molnupiravir.
The oral drug, developed by Merck and Ridgeback Biotherapeutics, can be taken twice a day at home. It was shown in clinical trials to lower the chance of being hospitalized or dying from COVID by half for people most at risk from the disease, if it's given early on within 5 days of symptoms appearing. And that drug is under review in a host of countries, including by Health Canada. And its approval in Britain follows a warning from one of England's top health advisors of hard months to come in the pandemic. It might sound like a broken record, but the virus is surging in Europe.
We are at another critical point of pandemic resurgence. Europe is back at the epicenter of the pandemic, where we were 1 year ago.
With new cases nearing record levels, the World Health Organization is warning Europe could see another 500,000 COVID deaths in the next 3 months if current trends continue.
Over the past 4 weeks, Europe has seen a greater than 55% increase in new COVID-19 cases. Last week, Europe and Central Asia accounted for 59% of all cases globally and 48% of reported deaths.
The director of the WHO's European region says the surge is driven by the Delta variant, and it's